This is the second to the last lecture that we'll have. The next one will be Sophie Cal, and she'll be, I think, on March 30th. So I could be wrong on that date, and please don't hold me to it, but around then. We really have a lot of people to thank. I mean, Chrissy Bradley has helped immensely in making all the logistics for Erik happen smoothly. Pier 24 is, a wonderful contributor, and I'm really happy to say now that Bob and Randy Fisher have also contributed to make these lectures happen. So there feels like there's a real coming together of forces to bring as interesting people as possible to the Bay Area, to sort of fill us with wonder. And also always, Larry Sultan, who guides us and me in innumerable ways. I thought I was going to write something out, and I didn't about Erik. I know Erik. I'm always taken aback when I see him again because he's kind of, well, he's taller than I am, and he's more, he doesn't reveal himself completely like I might be doing right now. And so I'm always taken aback by the kind of almost a stiffness, because he does run an advertising agency. And then the more time I'm with him, the more I realize why I love him so much is because he's really dark and dirty and subversive and funny and makes things in ways that most of us could never imagine getting away with. And I think, at least for me, for many of you here, he's like he's like my special friend that you're finally getting to meet. And it's just really, really selfishly, it's really nice to have him here. So I think we'll be, I think all of you might come away as enamored as I am with him after this talk. Not to put much pleasure, but thanks, Erik, for coming, really.
Thanks a lot. So I introduced myself a little bit and first talk a little bit on how I started the company in Amsterdam. And the company is called Kessels Kramer. And I'm grown as an advertising art director, as a graphic designer. And I worked for many years in advertising agencies in Holland and also for a few years in London. And then 15 years ago, we decided to, my partner and I decided to start our own agency in Amsterdam. And this is how we looked 15 years ago. It was our first group picture. And there were a few things why we wanted to start for ourselves, is that, we had quite a lot of frustration working in advertising because, to be honest, I really hate advertising. Funny enough, I work already 20 years in it, but and that's also was a good motivation to start our own agency, because in agencies traditionally the creatives are always like kept away from the clients. And we 15 years ago had the idea that we just wanted to work much more direct with clients. And another very strong point was that we also wanted to involve our hobbies into our work, and I'll get back to that later. Another thing was, which was important, is that a lot of advertising agencies, they say that they are creative, but when you are in there, it looks like a account office, or so it has white walls and fluorescent lights, and it's not very creative. So in Amsterdam, we bought a church back then, and like this is our office. So we made it more into a playground, which is, it was an abandoned church already since the 70s, and it was for sale. So it was in the newspaper in a little ad. So we took it, and at the moment we are 35 people in there in Amsterdam. And as I said, nowadays you can cross over with a lot of disciplines. That was 15 years ago, was much different, because all the disciplines were quite locked then. When you are, when you are a graphic designer, you stuck purely to graphic design, and when you are a photographer or a curator, you stick to that. And nowadays it's very difficult at the moment when people ask me like, what do you do, or what is your profession, then I don't have an answer to that. But maybe showing the stuff today will help that a little bit. And since a few years, like 3 years, we also have an office in London, which is called KK Outlet. And this is in the basement we have an office, and on the ground floor we have a shop and a gallery. So we since a few years we also publish books. I come back to that later. And in the gallery we change every 6 weeks the work. And that can be photography, it can be art, can be graphic design. And this is during an opening, it's always very busy there. It has also a lot to do because we serve free beer. So when the beer is finished, then the 150 people disappear very quickly. But to show first some work that we started with in 1996. So I'm first going to show some advertising work, and then slowly how it crossed over with different disciplines, and later I'm going to show more of the autonomous projects. This is one of the first campaigns we made for a shoe store in Amsterdam called Shoe Baloo, and here we decided to use like handicapped people with one leg as models, and we within a few days putting a classified ad in a newspaper, we had like 15 people that wanted to work with us. And the reason was that normally in fashion and they never use these people, but and when they are portrayed in the media, handicapped people, they're always portrayed very pitiful. So we want to make them very proud, wearing one shoe, holding the other shoe. And this girl, for instance, people have a lot of humor. This girl also said like, it's a big advantage when you have only one leg, because you don't have smelly feet, you just have a smelly foot. Another thing we did for Nike is we were asked to organize something around the marathon in Berlin. And Nike at that time was in Germany seen as a very American company. And because in Germany it was predominantly Adidas, and so we thought like to focus purely on the oldest runner in the race, and his name was Heinrich Blümchen. He was 78 years old, and for 3 years we just focused totally on him by doing the campaign about him, and he always got maybe 20 minutes later in than normal, because he was always stopped by TV and radio stations to do an interview. But it was also, I mean, for us with advertising, it's also interesting to always look a little bit in another way, look in another direction, because a lot of it is done in a very stereotyped way. And with these ideas, you can, you create a lot of sympathy. This is an ad we did for Diesel. We worked 6 years for them, and this is, Diesel always works with a certain irony. Here the campaign was called Save Yourself, and where we showed tips how people can stay younger all the time. And here it's by drinking urine as a tip. Another campaign was called Action. It was actually done by Carl de Keyser, a Magnum photographer. And I also, since like 15 years, I also work a lot with photographers that actually never did a commercial job before. And I just try to interest them to work together. And so in that way, I worked already with many photographers that maybe only once or twice do a commercial job. And in this way, we made all kinds of protests on the street, and but then with very positive things. So here it was like respect your mum, or more green traffic lights, or free the goldfish. All these kind of very positive things. For Vitra, we also work. It's a furniture company in Switzerland. And the next slide, the next film I'm going to show you is a commercial for a beer company in Holland called Bavaria, and they beers are predominantly targeted on male, and we found like a little fact in the newspaper that men nowadays are not really men anymore. They don't behave like men anymore because they're more kind of metrosexuals. They are. And because they like more than ever gardening, they go quite often to the hairdresser. They use body lotions, all these kind of things. So this spot was done to kind of let them break loose again and come back to their roots again.
I once wore armor.
I would hunt animals with teeth as long as my arms.
I would chase adventure to the four corners of the world.
We carried spears.
We would kill or be killed. And all that mattered was survival.
Yeah, another company we worked for a long time is a mobile phone company called Ben. And if you say ik ben Ben, that means in Dutch I am Ben. So it's also a verb, Ben. But we thought it's nice to call a phone company after a person because you know, it's also all about, a person is also everything about communication and a phone company as well. And here we, from the beginning, we really wanted to mix all the people in the campaigns that we had, because if you call a company after a person, you have to be also, you have to switch every day with your tempers, with your moods, so I show you a few films. Up till now we made about, I think 250 short spots for them, all with different kind of emotions.
Is ook nog tijd. Morgen over een week hebben we een groot overleg. Ja, dat is de ruime tijd. Wat we ook kunnen doen is verkopen. We verhuizen op de feiten. Als je de gegevens afzet, degene dwingen ons te kopen. Oké, koproepopties, koproepopties. Ik zorg wel dat ze weg. Maar ook die extra jongen inschakelen die vorig jaar zo goed die hebben afgesloten met opties. Die ene, die bij die concurrent heeft gewerkt. Misschien geeft hij een extra stuk wel dat ze de beurs komt. Ik denk dat we gewoon nu tot actie moeten overgaan en niet moeten afwachten. Ik bedoel zeker geval wel over een uurtje.
Okay.
This film was more about a social aspect, that when you are on the phone, that you people that are on the phone don't have an eye for what's happening around them anymore. And this is another one.
Dag. Hallo? Hallo?
Yeah, another company we work for already like 15 years at the moment is Hensbrinker Budget Hotel in Amsterdam. This was actually your first client. I'm just going to show a few things of it, but it's a whole case in a way. But they were the first one who called, and I mean, we couldn't turn them down because we had no other job. So we went there to the hotel and checked it, and I haven't seen such a bad hotel in my life. It was a total shithole, and it still is, by the way, but 15 years later. But so we came up with soon already we found out that in a way honesty was their only luxury, because you couldn't make it better than it was. You had to be honest about that. So we made for a long time very ironic and almost anti-advertising for them. And when they started, they had 60,000 overnights, and in a way the briefing from the owner was only I don't want any complaints anymore. So that was so we did all kinds of for instance. These were a series of posters. I'm going to show one. Now a bed in every room. And there were many other ones, like now a door in every room, and a free key, and all those kind of things. Another thing was that we used a few years later, because we thought it's nice to show also once the people that visit the hotel. And here we use this kind of classical advertising trick of before and after. So it's check in and check out. So. And after a few years doing these things, the amount of backpackers and students that went there went rapidly up. They went from 60 to 80 or 90,000 in 2 years' time, and so we were we thought it's nice to make a very luxurious campaign. So we reused these 5-star hotel images that we kind of nicked from hotels in Asia. And we just put all kinds of stars on there, and in the right-hand bottom it says like not included. So literally nothing was included. Yeah, so there's a lot of work of this for 15 years, and I just show you the last thing we did for them. So after doing all these kind of things that were very bad in a way, and now there was one thing which was the first time in 15 years that we found something very positive of the hotel, and that was that they were like accidentally eco-friendly. So we made all kinds of. This was a poster saying they had an eco towel in the room. And so they were, but this, it's funny that this campaign came in a way from something that was already existing in the hotel, which is this. It's of the hotel sign, only the L was burning for many years. So it has like an eco fact on top there, and it says like our hotel uses only 20% of the energy of normal hotels. And so it also shows that a lot of times the idea is already on the street, literally. But at the moment, the hotel, we recently made this book called The Worst Hotel in the World. And the hotel has now, after 15 years, 145,000 overnights a year. And they didn't refurbish anything, or it looks worse than the first time I got in. But it's very successful. It's a cult destination now, and people are now complaining again because on the internet, because they're complaining because they think it's better than they expected. So that is kind of the nice counterpart now. Yeah, another thing we did for the city of Amsterdam, we did the identity for the city of Amsterdam called I Amsterdam. And we did a photo book with 20 Amsterdam photographers documenting the city, and also this kind of public sculpture where people take photographs of. So that was more like a design job. We also do quite a lot of cultural work for festivals and for exhibitions, and this was an exhibition in Holland called Not Normal. This was a big exhibition with a lot of international artists, and it was only dealing with the fact of what is normal and what's not normal and who decides that. And because everything is quite quickly stigmatized these days, so they were trying to break that with this exhibition. And we did like the posters, but we also made some web films, and I'll show you one of them. Sometimes also show this in the morning, but that's not a good idea. Yeah, another thing I recently did, I did a stamp for the post office in Holland, and here they asked us to come up with a new technology in stamps. So I made this stamp out of a lenticular effect. So nowadays with lenticular, with this lenticular effect, you can, on a stamp, you can have 30 frames of film. And I invited Anton Corbijn, the Dutch filmmaker and photographer, to direct, in a way, the shortest and the smallest film ever. So, and that's also how we promoted it. So this is, in a way, kind of a classical Dutch stamp with a windmill on the back, and normally the Queen is there, but now there's somebody else. And I'll show you just the promotional film for this. So we also introduced the stamp at a film festival. So we invited all the people and said that there was a new film of Anton Corbijn with Carice van Houten, the most famous Dutch actress. And so we got them all in tuxedo for the opening, and then the film was only 1 second, so that was quite funny. Yeah. Now I move slowly to something else. Another activity we do in the agency is that we have our own brand called Do, D-O, and the idea of this, it's more an experimental brand where we try to work with the fact that people nowadays they don't interact a lot with their products anymore. I mean, they do when they buy something at IKEA, but normally when you buy a chair, you maybe you sit on it for a long time. When it's broken, you repair it maybe one time, but then after that, when it breaks again, they just put it on the street. And our idea is that with this brand, that I showed 2 products, but we made a whole range of products that people really have to do something, because otherwise nothing happens. So this is a chair which is like 1 by 1 by 1 meter, made out of just metal, a very beautiful shiny cube, and you buy it together with a sledgehammer, and then you can shape it in whatever way you like. And another product is this vase, and you can actually throw with it. It's made out of thin porcelain. And when you throw with it, it breaks, but it doesn't fall apart, but because the inside is made out of silicon. So it becomes, in a way, much more beautiful all the time, and you still can pour water in it and put flowers in it. But it has a very nice function, because, in a way, everybody likes to throw with a vase, but then normally you can't do it, but in this way you can. So this is more like a experimental, we do this for 10 years, and some of the products get produced, some not, of course, but it comes also from our desire to, for instance, to be once your own client. But that didn't work yet. But it will be very nice when you have your own brand, and then at one point you become your own client. But it's still in an experimental phase. Yeah, and now I just show you some exhibitions that we did. I mean, the last few years we get much more involved in coming up with ideas of exhibitions and put them together, either with our own work or with work of others. This was an exhibition at the Architecture Biennale in Venice, and it was called Singletown. And this had all kinds of prototypes in there of products where single people in the future would live with, because I mean the population of singles is rapidly growing all over the world, and so this was more a future prediction of products for singles. This is an exhibition of the work that we do as a company for Kessels Kramer, but it's now in Milan, in the Triennale in Milan, where there's an exhibition with 35 graphic designers worldwide. And another thing, last year I curated also the New York Photo Festival, and there I did an exhibition called Use Me, Abuse Me, with all kinds of artists that kind of reuse their own work again and cut it up or paste it or copy it. And this was in Dumbo in New York. So I created this very playful space where you walk through and then see the work of all these people that, in a way, a lot of them knew their work, but they never got together. So that was also quite nice that they all could go there. And that's from 15 people from all kinds of different countries. Yeah, and the last thing in this section is also quite I think a special project that we did in 2002. This was 2002, there was the World Cup soccer in South Korea and in Japan, and Holland didn't qualify, so there were a lot of people in the office that had spare time, and so suddenly somebody saw that you can look at the FIFA ranking, and Holland was at that time at the 9th place worldwide, so but then you can scroll down, and the whole list goes till 2003, or 203. So there are 203 countries involved in the FIFA, and the bottom two countries, that was Montserrat and Bhutan. Both of them never won a game in their life. The national teams, they never won a game. So we came up with a plan to organize a final, like an other final. The project is called the Other Final, and between the two lowest qualified football nations, and then we would play the final exactly at the same time as the World Cup final in Tokyo. So the team of Montserrat is a volcanic island, Caribbean island, so there we couldn't play it. So it was played in Bhutan, and there were like 25,000 visitors on that day. And the whole game was organized by 4 people in our office within 2 months. Very bad game, by the way. Even worse than many amateur games. But it was more about these teams and these countries that, like, you know, that they also had once like a very big podium to play on. And here are this is the Bhutan team and the Montserrat team. And if you look at the team photos, you already see who won and who lost, because it's they totally lost the game. So and then there's a documentary made about it, also called The Other Final. And yeah, we made a cup, like the alternative World Cup, and it was just like like this. Okay, then I go a little bit into where I started. I mean, for us it's also important that we can integrate our hobbies into work. And so for some years we publish our own books and make also exhibitions with that. And so I'll show you a few of those projects. For instance, one book is called Wonder, where we collected all kinds of photography that people discarded. So that's almost over now. This was the last period that you really could do it, because there were still like 1 hour photo service points where you could print your negatives, and now it's almost the end of the era now, because people just delete their errors on their phones or on their digital cameras. But we just collected the work that people threw away, and there are beautiful images. For instance, this image is from a woman who got like 24 photographs on a roll of film, and the roll of film got stuck, so her whole holiday was photographed on one negative. And and she hated that picture because it was so painful for her, but it's a beautiful image, I think. Yeah, there's a lot of double exposures, of course. It's also something that won't happen anymore now, but here you see the flames coming out of her. A lot of very decisive moments. And I mean, some pictures are beautiful. This one is fantastic, I think. It's like science fiction almost. A horror film. This is my favorite. And another magazine we make now for about 9 years now. It's called Useful Photography, and I make it with 4 other editors together. And this comes from the need we had together, is that to make a photo magazine where only photography ends up in, that is normally never seen in a photography magazine, because there are there's much imagery that we work with every day, and but we don't know the name of the photographer, we don't know when it was made, we don't know anything of it, because we just use it and day in, day out. So in this was the first issue. We just democratically took those images from its original content, and then just put them all into the magazine. And with the 5 of us, we all of us had we had like collections of this kind of work that we really liked. For instance, this is also one. I had this picture, and I actually think it's a beautiful picture, but I also blew it up once and hang it above my bench. And I mean, after a few weeks, you really start to love this image. Funny enough, but nobody believes me. But so this is like some imagery that is in that first issue, and then it just is juxtaposed against each other. And if you take it from its original context and then you really start to like it. This one I love, for instance. It's such a naive photograph, but very useful. So, and then in the end, we had already some exhibitions with it. So it's quite funny that the work goes from a brochure into a magazine and then into a museum. So that is an interesting idea to delocate these images. The second issue we made completely on photography that we found on eBay of people that use their homes as a studio. Because first you would sell your stuff like in a garage sale or on the street, but now people have to be very creative, like the amateurs, they have to be very creative to kind of make pictures of their goods, the stuff that they want to sell. And that creates the most beautiful things. Here you see a speaker on a billiard, or I mean, when people photograph a wedding dress, they have to put it against a black background. And a lot of times the bed cover is used because that's one big white sheet, so they put a lot of things on there. or there's, for instance, there's a coin always next to things for the reference. Pieces of white paper or a ruler. And this is my favorite on the right. It's like 2 crucifixes on a bench with a ruler in between. I mean, there's no professional photographer who would ever come up with an image like this. I think it's. I mean, it's. I love that image. It's really nice. But also from, I mean, the mistakes and the errors that amateurs make. I get a lot of inspiration from that. Another issue is on cow photography, believe it or not, because there is, in every country, there is a photographer who takes photographs of cows. And this issue is on, there's this bull called Lord Lilly. He's on the cover. And he produced, with his sperm, he produced about 150,000 children. And in this magazine there are like a selection of his daughters. And these are pictures from all over the world, from the US, from Argentina, Germany, Denmark, Holland. And the cows are always photographed in the same way, because there's always a little bit of grass underneath their first 2 legs. That's just to straighten the back. And then there's always kind of a fake tail there, artificial tail that they stick on. And they patch also this was even done before Photoshop, they patched the back also with black and with white hair to make it more straight. And then there's always somebody holding it from behind. So there's a lot of different sceneries, and it's almost like a typology how this is made. Very classical. And the owners of these cows, they ask for these images just to keep track of the breed and of this whole race. And if you type in Lord Lilly on internet, you will see a lot of these images. And then I have also a little film, because the Dutch photographer, we filmed him, and it's actually, it takes a long time to photograph a cow. Normally almost like half an hour. Won't take that long, this film, but you see that it's a very special trait.
Rechts voor ietsjes achteruit, iets naar buiten toe. Kan de voorkant van het blokje ietsjes gras bovenop gooien? Okay.
The thing which is also nice that he has his car parked in the field. You see it here. And when the cow is perfectly standing, then he walks to the car and puts his cassette tape in there with cow sounds. So you will see that later. So the cow gets even more focused.
Nee, kom maar. Nee, dat niet voor mij hoor. Nou, dan is het moeilijk. Ik heb echt dat het geschoven is. Blijf even staan, dan ook weer de band stakken.
Now the cassette tape goes in. That's the image. But this took half an hour in total. Yeah, one other issue was a war special, and here we found that every country has its own camouflage uniform, which is kind of bizarre. Like that, in a way, when you're very effective, you would have all the same camouflage uniform. But we made also a film. In the magazine, you see all the images of the camouflage, but then we made also this film. One of the last issues is is all about photography that we took from pornographic websites. And the funny thing here is that you see there's always like some pictures where they really try to get you into the website, and that's these kind of images we used, where these actors, so-called actors, at least show a little bit of their acting qualities. And so in the magazine there's no sex, but it's only like just the moment before you're going to see what's happening. And then you see that there's a lot of different role plays that they have, like birthday parties, refurbishing parties. There's also, of course, the pizza delivery, which is on the right it says Big Sausage Pizza. So it's also very useful photography, because these photographs are used to just use your credit card, and then this one is also my favorite on the left here, like a woman in a red dress pouring water over herself. You know why, but yeah. So we continue with we make like almost every year we make an issue with that useful photography. Yeah, and then another series of photographs I make myself is called In Almost Every Picture, and this started with this book. It's the first book I did, and I found on a flea market in Barcelona, I found 400 images of this woman. And it was only when I got home that I found out that 98% of the images contained this woman, and for the rest there were like a few images where she wasn't on. And it was a beautiful history of a husband photographing his wife for 12 years. And sometimes they did like a little amateur photo shoot, because here he brought a rose and he asked her to hold the rose in her mouth. And I mean, there were like about 400 images. And then another thing, which is because I edited the images on just in time, because on the slides there were just the dates. And then, but what you see if you flick through the book, you see that this woman is like slowly getting smaller, because there you also see that the photographer got a lot of more eye for the background and less for her, which is a very painful thing. But you see that in a lot of family albums, like when a woman gets older, the photographer goes back. And because this image is the last one in the book, and here she's almost disappeared. But with this first book, I got also like curious who this woman was, and I went back to Barcelona. I did an exhibition and a presentation for the book there, and I also did send like a press release that I was asking if anybody could find out who this woman was. And there was an enormous response, because she was on the national news, and they called her Senora X and La Mujer Misteriosa. And about 2 weeks later, there was a woman in her 70s coming to the gallery, and she said that she knew this woman, and her name was Josefina Iglesias, of this woman. And she died maybe 15 years before, and her husband also died soon after that. And they always went on holiday in Spain. And so in a way the circle was kind of round with this. And then over the years I collected more and more stories that I find on flea markets, and I'm not only interested in found photographs, but more when there's a really kind of a narrative in like a personal story with a certain narrative, and so from that moment on, almost every year I kept making a new book, because you never know when you find the next collection. This is a second book where this is from a taxi driver from Holland, and he has this client, a woman who asks him to do like 3 or 4 day trips to Germany, Switzerland, Austria. It's an older woman, and 700 slides where on all 700 he photographed the car. So the driver stepped out of the car and took a picture of his Mercedes taxi, and I mean, beautiful photographs. But then I also found out that on all 700 images, the woman is sitting in the car. And, you know, here you hardly see it, but she's still sitting there. And here she looks at him. And some images are beautiful. Here she's asleep. And then also with sunset, she's still in the car, or at night, she's still in the car. And then there was one image where she took a photograph of the cab driver, but that was also taken from the car, because here you see the side of the car, and so that's the only image where he appeared in. And then I did also some research in where the village where he lived, the taxi driver, because I knew his name, and there was like a little notebook. And then it turned out that this woman was handicapped. So that's why he, in the morning, put her in the car, put the wheelchair maybe in the back of the car, and in a way he made her kind of holiday snaps by parking the car in front of a touristic attraction, and then taking a picture of it. but also a very, you know, it's almost like a film script, but it's very rare that you find these stories. The next one was on, I found it in Brussels on the market, but these are non-identical twins from in Barcelona again. But I found the enormous amount of albums on the market in Brussels of these two. And in the book there are about 80 sets of outfits that they were wearing. So for many years they would go parading over on the streets in Barcelona, just wearing exactly the same, as if they want to show the world like we belong together. We don't look like each other, but we are really twins. And then at a certain moment they get like a boyfriend. And he, I don't know, oh yeah, this is the other, this should be first. So they get a boyfriend, but then the next image, the date of the next image was this one. And he becomes a soldier. And actually, this is the last image in those albums where they ever appear on together, because this is the next image. And then from that moment on, you only see the smaller of the two left in the frame, or left on the image. And she always stands like left or right of the frame. So she leaves kind of an imaginary space for her sister. And I had like albums from this woman up till she's 80 years old. But in those albums, her sister never came back anymore. So sometimes it's a sad ending, sometimes it's a very funny ending, but I mean, by looking at those albums and editing them and almost like it's kind of a sort of visual archaeology that you do, and you really take it apart and look at it, and then you sometimes find amazing stories. So I also sometimes exhibit with these collections that I have, and yeah, so here is Josefina, it's on the wall in a museum. And actually it's quite interesting that people, you know, like people are very attracted to these kind of amateur series because they see themselves in it, and they see also the mistakes that they make themselves in photography. This was in Arles, in the photography festival, where I had the same exhibition. Yeah, and one of the last books was also quite a special story. I made now 9 books, and they all have the same title. It's very not very smart, but on the other hand, that was the best title, so I used it for all the books. Also called In Almost Every Picture Again. And here I heard that there was a woman in Holland in a small town. It's this woman on the right there. Her name is Ria, and when she was 16-year-old, she shot a photograph at a fun fair. So you know it works like this: you take the gun, you pay for the bullets, and then when you hit the bullseye, the bullseye is in a way the trigger for the photo camera, and it takes a picture of you. And in the early days, that was you had to go back the next day to collect the print because it made a negative of it. But later that became Polaroid. So here you see that every day she, or every year she went back to the fun fair and shot an image. And she did that she's now 90 years old, and she's still shooting, still alive, and you see in a way the whole history of photography in this book. The funny thing in the book is also that you see like there's a certain gap from 1938 till 1946, because there was no fun fair. There were other people shooting, but And then it went into Polaroids. And normally you see the guns lying like on this table underneath, but then at a certain moment her walking stick appeared. So then on all the images after that, her walking stick was lying there. And this is her now, like with the book when it was made. And the I don't know. Yeah, the funny thing was also that after I made the book, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Amsterdam, they were so excited about that, the originals of, I mean, she had just like a little folder or a little album in her house with all the Polaroids in there and all the prints in there. So the museum acquired like her whole collection, and she got for her like a lot of money from it. So now she's, for 2 years, she's like partying and giving bus trips with her friends, and she's really burning the money. And then in the there was like a big scandal also in Holland, because a lot of photographers, because like the museum does like every 3 years acquisitions for photography, and this year they like bought for an enormous amount of money from this amateur, and but that was in a way I think it was like a breakthrough that this work is also seen. Oh yeah, there were enormous amount of publicity in England. It was in the Daily Telegraph, and they called her the woman who shoots herself. Would have been a good book title. Yeah, the last book I did in that series that just came out a few months ago, that is about a family who is dealing with one of the big mysteries of photography. That's how to shoot a black dog. And yeah, it always failed. It's like a black phantom, but beautiful pictures. I found this in New York on a flea market, just in an album. That's a beautiful image, I think. And in the end, here's another one. It's like a black limp at the end of his feet. At the end, they really got frustrated, so they started to push the film. And then at the end of the book, there's only one image where they totally overexposed everything. And that's the only image where you see a little bit of his eyes and a little bit of his... but then the rest is all very bleached out. Yeah, and then the final one, I can't stop. A lot of... this is one I did... I collected these pictures from a weblog on internet. That started in 1999. That was one of the first weblogs on internet, and this is a guy also an amateur in a provincial town in Japan, who had a pet and like a rabbit. And it was called Oolong the rabbit. But at a certain moment, he found out that the rabbit can balance everything on his head. So every day, he would upload a new digital image on his weblog. And so I would go there every day in the morning, and then it really makes your day, you know, like... kept on going. It was like enormous collection. This one is my favorite. Yeah. At a certain moment, Oolong got a little bit sick, So you follow that also every day. And for a week I went on the blog and you know, you could follow that he was going backwards a little bit. And but then this was one day I checked it. There was this image, but that was not the next day was a new one. That was this one. That was the last one. There's two. There are two carrots in the snow. So that's it. Thanks very much. I didn't end very happy, but thanks. Maybe if you have some questions or things I forgot or.
Erik, can you talk about the commission that you did for, I think it was the French casket company? Was it the French one, I think? Where you did a museum to death?
Oh yeah, like I mean for me when I sometimes I'm invited also to curate exhibitions, but then it's also important that you can kind of put something new in there. So last year I did 3 times an exhibition in a museum on a graveyard. So there's a museum of contemporary art, very small museum, but it's based on a cemetery, and there I did like 3 exhibitions on where artists work with death as a subject. And so I quite like when there's already quite specific, you know, something where you can put an idea in, and that's for me also with working in all these different disciplines. You know, I'm not a specialist in most of them, but for me it's very, you know, when I can come up with a good idea and I can use that in that discipline, that is yeah, nowadays you can do that, and I mean, when I had the first, I was also quite amazed when I had the first quite major exhibition in a museum in Holland with all my own collections, that nobody was kind of writing or saying like funny, because there's this guy from an advertising agency who was suddenly in a museum, and I think when you are very authentic in every discipline you work, then yeah, I think that's important. I think that's also with the books. I mean, we don't pay for the books out of the profit of the company. You know, we just follow the same rules as anybody has to do, and we just let distributors sign in on them, and when they don't sign in on them, then it doesn't happen. And so I think that's important that you are authentic in every discipline you work. And that's also with, I think, with the thing that I like the most now after 15 years with the company, or that I'm most proud of, is that we never made a compromise on anything. I mean, in some cases we could have earned more money, maybe, but it's also very good to don't build up frustration and to you know, that you like the work you're doing, and I mean, that means that you sometimes have to stop with the client because it goes in the wrong direction. But at least that's, I mean, that's not something very, that happens a lot it doesn't happen a lot in advertising, because people are just like, it's only about money in the end. And but we like to, I mean, we like to be very creative and with projects, but we also like to be very effective. I mean, that is also important, that those two things to go together. And by doing this for so many years, I got also interested in photography. That's how I got like very much interested in doing this other work. Anybody else?
Do you take photos yourself at all?
Yeah, I do. I took a lot of Polaroids over the years, but I mean, it's more for fun. And but I sometimes use them now I found out it's always good to go back to them and see what you did, because now I have a collection of photographs that I took of my children when they have like a black eye or a running or a bloody nose, or I just go up to them with the camera and I take a picture of them. And that's also always a moment that nobody wants to see in a way, because when they see those pictures, immediately people think it's child abuse, but it's just something that happens every week. But it's also an interesting thing, like how people look at images. I mean, many family photographs, I see that a lot in these albums. It's pure propaganda in a way. I mean, family picture is always, everybody is on his best, you know, like beautifully tanned, beautifully smiling. There's never like amateurs that make very real photographs of real life, and it's always a little bit of a pose, and I find that interesting to look at those kind of systems, and yeah, so I do, but I'm not a photographer. I mean, there are other people better, and so.
They weren't photographers either. They were just documenting whatever their daily life was.
Yeah. Sorry, what was your question?
So I guess the question was like, do you think maybe you put some together of your own work like this?
Yeah, I use those images of my children, yeah, but where I could use them, because nobody would ever publish them, or nobody, I mean, people are, the images were also, for instance, the image of my daughter with a bloody nose was on the cover of a magazine, because there was an article on that fact, and then after it was on the cover, like 200 people stopped the subscription with the magazine. So I mean, but it's interesting that even when I explained the whole idea, it's interesting to investigate those things and open the discussion. And but I mean, the work I do myself is mostly like by looking at photographs and. I mean, there are so many photographs around nowadays, and I kind of reuse them and make stories out of them. And I mean the photographs of my children, I never thought about making this series, but I just did it over a few years, and then I saw certain patterns in there, and so for me it's always good to go back to them, and yeah. Anybody else?
Do you see any places in the U.S. where people have this type of avant-garde approach, or an approach you like? Where in the U.S. do you see this happening, or North America?
Yeah, I mean, there are also, for instance, there's a filmmaker called Jay Rosenblatt, who reuses old Super 8 footage to create new stories. He's very interesting. I mean, Larry Sultan, in a way, with that evidence book, is in a way the same kind of aesthetic as some of the useful photography. I mean, that was a long time ago, and so there are a lot of people busy with that, and but that's all over the world in a way. You see that. I mean, there's quite a lot in Germany. Hans-Peter Feldman, Peter Piller, Joachim Schmidt. They are all working with these kind of aesthetics, and yeah, for me, I come from a totally different end. I mean, I'm not. You know, when people sometimes ask, like, "Are you an artist?" or, you know, I can't say it. I just, for me, it's also kind of a luxury, of course, because I do it as almost as a hobby, and or it feels like a hobby. And but I'm very much interested in that, and I also are very much in contact with those other people, and we talk about it and we share things, and so it's interesting. But I think there are, I mean. In the US, there are also a lot of people doing that at the moment. Especially now, because with the internet, that's even more democratic, and people are more and more like editors instead of people that really stand behind the camera, or a certain type of people. They resample and they edit and they use work that they find and maybe in combination with the other work they do, but a lot of people do. Actually, I'm now preparing an exhibition for the Photo Festival in Arles this summer, which is only talking about that kind of those kind of artists who use the internet to generate work. And so it's, I mean, we found 35 very interesting artists from all kinds of countries that do that nowadays. So it's definitely something that's in the air.
I don't know if this is a dumb question, you don't have to answer it if it is, but do you think there's a Dutch sensibility that you fit into, or in terms of stuff that's going on now?
Dutch
sensibility or characteristic that shows up in your work and in other fields like architecture or anything?
Yeah, I mean, like the character of, yeah, I think, I mean, the fact that in Holland that you can cross over between a lot of disciplines has also to do with the scale of the scale of the country, of course. I mean, I think in the US, when you are very good in one thing, you better are very good in that thing, because then at least you stand above the crowd. I think, but it changes as well. But in yeah, in Holland it's much smaller, and I mean, and there is also within advertising using the irony. That is something you find in England and a little bit in Scandinavia and in Holland. But in Germany and France and Italy, you don't see any of that. I mean, it's so boring. And in France, it's only about aesthetics. In Italy, I don't know where it's about. And in Germany, it's all like, yeah, I mean... But I mean, there is it's nice to take a little bit the piss out of yourself with certain things. And I mean... yeah, but with this work, it's maybe with these books, it's something different. I mean, I mean, that's also sometimes it's very emotional, or that's also a little bit the. But it lays all. It's a little bit off the normal photography world, and but don't get me wrong. You know, I also really like. Photography of very good photographers and professionals, and that's also something I really admire. But this is more my thing, like what I can do. I'm not a photographer myself, and it also comes from the fact that I kind of use photography every day. I edit it for my work. So then that's also something very natural that to do. But I think it has a little bit something Dutch, but it's also, I mean, now it's rapidly changing because it's so universal with internet, and people share a lot of their work, and you find people doing the same kind of work all over the place.
Corollary to that, maybe can you talk about your website, how you design it, or how you use the website to?
No, we have that's also a reaction to. We have our own website, like kesselskramer.com. is just it's maybe not the smartest thing to do, but it's like there are about 200 websites in one website. So every time you reload, you find another kesselskramer.com, and sometimes it's a gardening company. Sometimes it's a hairdresser, sometimes it's a pool cleaner. But in a way, all our work is in those websites, because with the gardening company, we only show work that we made with grass in there. And then with the pool cleaning, we have a commercial with the swimming pool with the guy spitting. That's for the pool cleaning. That's Kessels Kramer pool cleaning. So, but people find it hard to find our telephone number, so yeah, there is a little bit of a downside to it. But a lot of people, like for 5-6 years now, every day on Twitter are people that talk about our website. So it has also something good, but it's there's a lot of people who call us like, what the fuck is going on with your website? We don't. So every time you reload it, you would never see the same site twice. But it's a choice, and probably not the best choice. But the thing is, now it's also very difficult. I'm already 3 years, sometimes waking up at night and thinking, we have to do something new. But I mean, we haven't come up with a better idea yet. So I don't know. Yeah.
What about these pervasive focus groups and market research that you find in this country for advertising? Is that something you avoid dealing with, or do you only deal with clients who give you free rein?
No, we don't avoid that. It's the same system. But, I mean, it's also something where you have to kind of be a little bit involved in it. But, you know, to be honest, at the moment it's also that, I mean, we don't work for a lot for like consumer products or for, I mean, yeah, there's also the people that knock at our door now are also people that know a little bit, yeah, that they want to challenge or that they fit a little bit with us, but I mean, the system is exactly the same. There are research, everything is researched, and not with everything. I mean, the hotel is something different, but that was a total, yeah, there was a unbelievable situation. You know, it could not go worse with the hotel. So there was no focus group needed, and. But I mean, now it's not that the hotel, the owner of the hotel, is not that he approves everything. You know, he also. But it's also very good that we have with our clients, with the best clients or where we made the best work for, we have a very good relationship. And I mean, it's a little bit like a girlfriend, and you should communicate well. You should just bring the best in each other. Bring out the best in each other, and just challenge each other a little bit. That's the same with the client. But I still find it. I mean, now I still find it amazing that since the last 5 years that we do so many different things, and that just is possible, and that is something very good at this time. I really enjoy that.
How do you feel that the growing accessibility of photography and imagery on the internet is going to change the type of editing and archiving that you're doing in every picture type of work, in the sense that it seems so wonderful and unique to go to a flea market and find these albums of pictures of somebody's entire life, but then how it developed into this series where it's on somebody's web blog that you can visit every day, and it's now just getting more and more accessible every day for the entire globe. How do you think that will affect the type of found photography? Will it lose its magic?
No, in a way, it's. I mean, now there's much more access to imagery, because before it was a personal, private photo album is a private photo album. You never get to see it, and you only get to see it when everybody dies, because that's really my experience. The albums on the market, there's nobody alive anymore, and because I tried it sometimes to track it down, but I mean, but now you see also on markets, in a way, everything is gone. It's the end of it now. I mean, in a few years' time, you will never find an album on the market anymore. But I mean, in a way, it's exactly the same, because in photo albums, 95% of all the photo albums are totally boring. I mean, people take pictures of mountains and of I mean, it's so there's nothing interesting in there. But it's the same in internet. I mean, it's a big garbage bin internet image-wise. But you know you have to really find your way and find interesting things. So in a way, that's the same. But the effect of it is that people now more and more take pictures, edit them, and I mean there are great examples already. I just saw yesterday work by a Swiss artist who collects. For instance, he has the Eiffel Tower, like a picture of the Eiffel Tower, and he collects thousands of those pictures taken by tourists, and then he lays them on top of each other. So it's like I mean, it's almost like like a still of a movable image, and it's fantastic work. You know, you can do so many every week you see new people making new things with existing stuff that's from the internet. And I mean, there's also, in the beginning of internet, you saw that a lot of people take a picture of themselves every day, for instance. I mean, that is now so all over, that's not interesting anymore. But yeah, I see almost every week new things happening, and not myself, but you know, I'm with friends, and we send it to each other when we find something, and so that's very. The access is fantastic. I mean, you get to see everything. Was there a question in the back? Oh, yeah.
Yes. Within the same question, how do you see the future of the book as an object, as a form of art?
Sorry.
The future of the book as an object, and not just images. With the internet, there is so much accessibility to images that are virtual, but the book as a form of art is kind of getting ready.
Yeah, for me it's important, the book, because I take it out of its original surrounding. I mean, the weblog of this is very busy, and I mean, the picture is like surrounded by a lot of graphics and a lot of... so by just putting them, giving it... you know, it's very easy to go through the book then. While with the website, you have to really go from one page to the other. It needs to load. It needs to and with the photographs in the albums, it's exactly the same thing, because yeah, an album is like you don't have a focus. There's a lot of pictures on a page, and so I think a book is a good way to in this way to do that. I think in other ways it's nice to have some photography on the internet again, to have it on that spot and to let it work in the best way. Is that clear, or? Yes? Anybody else?
How popular are your books in the U.S. and what kind of print runs do you do?
Yeah, from these books I make like 3,000 to 4,000 copies, and but we you know, we distribute them through Idea Books, which is a European distributor, and but sometimes it's difficult. So when people can order it from there, and also order it from our website, from kesselskramerpublishing.com, but then they sometimes it's quite problematic, for instance, also with the useful photography, to get it in the US, because then you need a bigger print run, because then you can make the price per magazine smaller, and then at least you earn a little bit of money with it, because now it's difficult to get it into the US, because you have to give so much discount, and then with the shipping, and then it's you almost have to give it for free, and so that's sometimes difficult. But in some cases, like the first 5 books in almost every picture got also made into a box set, and that was then done by Aperture, and they sold it. So then, yeah, sometimes there's a chance to get it then here, but yeah, that it is difficult. But you need to do it right. You need a little bit of a bigger print run. You need to at least like 10,000 or. But this is also a very niche subject, of course. So most of the books they go out of print after a few years, but it's not something. It's just for the people who like that kind of thing. Anybody else or? Okay. Thanks.